In the previous video, we talked about the product, sum, and count and average functions, which are the basic mathematical functions in Microsoft Excel. In this video, we will be talking about another set of basic functions, which are conditional functions, or also called if functions. Now, these functions, unlike the basic mathematical functions that we talked about in the previous video, does not perform the calculations unless a specific condition or criteria is met. So let's talk about the first one, the if function. The if function is useful if we want to return a specific value or message when a value meets a specific criteria that we set, and another message or value if it does not meet the criteria. To further understand, let's just use this example. We have here another set of data, column for role, which are student, staff, teacher, and student. Then we have their age, and we have an empty column for status. In this empty column, we want to show specific values if they are below 18, and another set of another value, another message if they are 18 and above. So let's try to do that. Let's use the if function on this cell first. Okay, so go to the formula bar, type equals if, open parenthesis, and on the first argument, we need to input the logical test, which is we want it to test if the value of a cell is below or above 18. In this case, let's use below 18. Let's test the age, which is in B17. If it's less than 18, that's going to be the logical test. Press comma, and we will go to the second argument. And the second argument, we need to input the value that we want to show if the value in B7 is indeed below 18. And if that's true, we want to show below 18. Take note that I'm using quotation marks to indicate that I'm entering a message. And you need to do that if you are trying to input a message into a function. If we press comma, we will go to the third argument, which tells us to input a value if it's false. So that means we have to input a message that will show up if the value in B17 is not less than 18. And in this case, we want it to show 18 and above. Close the function, hit enter, and we can see that it shows below 18. And why is that? Because the value in B17, which is the age of student 1, meets the criteria that it has to be less than 18. Now, let's do the same thing to this 44-year-old staff. Equal if, open parenthesis, the logical test. This time, we are going to be testing the value in B18, but we have to do the same test, less than 18. If it's true that it's indeed less than 18, we want it to show below 18. If it's false, if it's not less than 18, it has to show 18 and above. Close the function, hit enter, and we can see that the 44-year-old staff is indeed 18 and above because it does not meet the criteria that it has to be less than 18. Let's do the same thing once more. Equals if, open parenthesis, B19 less than 18, quotation marks, below 18, quotation marks, comma. If false, we want it to show 18 and above. Close quotations, close the function, hit enter, and we can see that the 26-year-old teacher is 18 and above. Once more, if B20 is less than 18, it has to show the message below 18. If not, it has to show 18 and above. Hit enter. You can see that it shows 18 and above because 32 is not less than 18. Finally, equals if B21, if it's less than 18, it has to show below 18. If not, it has to show 18 and above. And because 17 is less than 18, the status shows below 18. That's how you use the if function. Now, let's add another column for category. Okay. Now, for this category, we have 4 categories. Category A, B, C, D, which corresponds to category A has to be below 20, category B has to be 20 to 29, category C has to be 30 to 39, and all of those 40 and above has to be in category D. So we have multiple categories, and for this, the ifs function is useful because the ifs function is similar to an if, but we can have multiple logical tests. And what it does is that it returns specific values for each logical test, and it shows a specific value for the first true logical test. For the first student, let's type equals ifs open parenthesis, and we can see that we need a first logical test, logical test 1, which we will be testing the value in B17. And the criteria that it has to meet first is it has to be below 20. If it's true, we want it to show the letter A. If you press comma, we will be asked to input another logical test and another value if true. Now, the second logical test that we need to do is to test the same cell, but this time has to be below 30. Why is it below 30? Because the range is 20 to 29, and all of the values from 20 to 29 are all below 30. Take note that we cannot put less than 29 here, because if we put less than 29, any 29-year-old will be excluded from this group. So we have to put less than 30. If B17 is below 30, it has to show B. Now, if we press comma once more, again, we will be asked to input the third logical test and the third value if true. And since we are testing the same cell over and over again, we will be using B17, but this time it has to be less than 40. If it's true, we want it to show C. And lastly, the fourth logical test is if B17 is greater than or equal 40. Now, why did we input greater than or equal 40? Because the criteria says 40 above. 40 above also means 40 and above. So we have to include all of those that are equal to 40. If it's true, it has to show category D. Now that we have run out of criteria and logical tests, we can close the function, hit enter, and we can see that because the student is 16 years old, they're categorized in category A. Let's do it again. Equals if logical test 1 is B18 is less than 20, comma, it has to show A. If B18 is less than 30, it has to show B, comma, B18 is less than 40, it has to show C. But if B18 is greater than or equal to 40, has to show category D. Close the function, hit enter. We can see that the 44-year-old staff is classified into category D because he is indeed 40 and above. Now, a little tip for you. If you are going to be using the same formula or same function for multiple rows or multiple columns with the same criteria, we can just select the cell with the function or formula, and if we hover around the corner of this cell, our cursor becomes a plus. If we click and hold and drag it down, we can see that it automatically copies the function And if we just scroll through all of these rows, we can see that it uses the same function but tests different cells. The COUNTIF function allows us to count specific values and not the entire selection. For example, if we want to count only those who are below 18, we can use the COUNTIF function. Let's go to the cell and type equals COUNTIF, open parenthesis, type the range. In this case, we have C17 colon C21 and type the criteria. We want to count all of those below 18. And again, remember to use the quotation marks because we are counting messages and not numbers. If we close the function and hit enter, we will see that it will count 2 that are below 18. Now, if we want to count all of those 18 and above, type equal COUNTIF, open parenthesis, select the range C17 colon C21. The criteria is 18 and above. Quotation marks, close the function, enter. 3. Now in this method, we manually type the criteria that we wanted to count. But there's another way to do this. Especially if we have a label here which exactly matches with the status, we can use this cell for the criteria. For example, if we want to count all of those below 18, we use COUNTIF, select the range which is C17 to C21, and for the criteria, if we don't want to manually type the criteria and if we have a label that exactly matches the status, we can just select the cell that contains the criteria, which is C23. Close the function. We hit enter. We can see that it counts the same. Let's do the same thing with the categories. Let's count all of those in category A, all of those in category B, C, and D. For category A, let's type COUNTIF, open parenthesis, select the cell or the range D17 to D21, and for the criteria, let's select the cell that contains the category that we're counting, B27. Close the function, hit enter, and we can see that it counts 2, which is correct. But this time, I don't want to type the function 3 more times. So what we can do what we did in this column. Go to the corner of the cell. When the cursor becomes a plus, click, hold, and drag it down, release. But there's something wrong. The count for the category B is correct. It shows 1. The count for the category C is also 1, which is also correct. But the count for category D is 0, which is incorrect. Because there's one staff who belongs to category D. So what went wrong? Let's see. If we look at the formula, in A27, the reference range and cells are D17 to D21 and B27. We have 2 references. When we dragged it down to the second row, what it does is it also drags down the references. So that means the reference to B27 is dragged down to B28. That's why we have B28 here. But it also drags down the main reference. And we can see that in this formula, the range becomes D18 to D22 and excludes D17. So that's already a mistake. So what we need to do is, we need to lock this reference without locking the red reference. And how do we do that? We do that with the use of the $sign. The $sign locks specific references in columns or rows. If we input the $sign next to the letter, it locks the column. But if we drag it down, because only the column is locked, we can see that the blue reference is still dragged down together with the formula. So we also need to lock the rows. So we put $sign next to the numbers as well. This way, if we drag it down, the reference is also locked vertically. And we can see, if we go down to 828, the red reference is dragged down, but the blue reference stays the same. If we go to the third one, the red reference is dragged down to B29, which is what we needed, but the blue reference is not dragged down as well because it was locked, which is also what we wanted to do. And we can see here that on the fourth one, the red reference is dragged down to B30, which is also correct because we wanted to count all of those in category D. And also, the reference is locked in place. So that means it was able to count the staff in category D. Now, average if is used when we want to average values in specific categories. So for example, we want to get the average age of those that are 18 and above. So how do we do that? Okay, so let's see. Let's make another table, criteria, average age. So in this case, our criteria is below 18 and 18 and above. To do that, to calculate the average age of those below 18, we go to the cell, type the formula, average if, open parenthesis, type the range in which we want to look for the criteria. In this case, the range where we want to look for the criteria is C17 to C21. And the criteria that we're looking for is in this cell below 18, F28. And again, we want to just lock it in so we can just drag it down. Now, the third argument for this formula asks us for the average range. Now, this average range is the range that you want to get the average. In this case, we want to get the average of the values in B17 to B21. And we want to lock it as well. So we put $signs, close the function, hit enter, and we can see that the average age is already calculated automatically. If we want to calculate the average of those 18 and above, equals average if, open parenthesis, the range in which we want to look for the criteria. So C17 to C21, lock it in, comma, the criteria is in F29. And the range we want to average is in B17 to B21. And we want to lock the range as well. So we put $signs.